being quite a tall person, being up here feels very intimidating, like I'm a very intimidating person. So thank you very much, Roy, for inviting me this evening. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm just going to talk you through my own personal startup journey. I'm a big believer in lean. I will talk a bit about that. And then about 2/3 of the way through, then I'll tell you specifically about what my startup is, about Textocracy. I'll give you a bit of the pitch, and then we'll look at it working. So on the boards to either side of you, there is a mobile number up there. If you text a comment to that number, it is anonymous, it's free for you, and it goes into the data dashboard, which becomes the informatics page for Roy to see what everyone thought about the event tonight. So you can say, please get this silly woman off the stage, she's very boring. Or you can say, great to have sandwiches, I was starving. Or any other thing that you might want to say. So feel free to text that. Like I say, it's free and anonymous, and we'll look at it later. As Roy said, I'm quite new to startup world and to entrepreneurialism. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about that story. So it will just be my own personal journey. I have learned a few lessons, but I am by no means an expert, and I know there are a lot of people in this room who have a lot more experience than me, and it's probably best to listen to them at the break. So without further ado, this is my company, Textocracy. I am the CEO and founder, and it's just, depending on how you look at it, it's a little over a year old or a little under a year old, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So despite the funny accent, I do consider myself a Yorkshire lass, because when I first came to England 23 years ago, my first friends were from West Yorkshire, so I spent a lot of time in the Keighley area and some villages like Silsden and places like that. Fell in love with the area, went off to school down in Nottingham and worked in the East Midlands a bit and this, that and the other. Then moved up to the northeast and then took a job in Barnsley. So this was, gosh, how long ago would this have been? A while ago, but I'll talk about that in a minute. And lived in South Yorkshire while I worked in Barnsley. My absolute favorite place. The only reason I moved, and this is not lean, so this is a lesson I'm going to share with you. I got my head turned by prestige and status and money with a job down in Herefordshire. Now Herefordshire is lovely. It's full of sheep and apple orchards, usually all in the same spot. But I did not enjoy that job. And I was just coming up to 20 years in the NHS and local government where I was a director of public health. Now, a director of public health is responsible for a geographic area. So you're beholden to both the local NHS trusts and the local government that covers that area. So you have two giant bureaucratic masters that you must serve. And I'm sure many people have heard all the rumors, or maybe you've even experienced yourself, NHS reorganizations every 2 years. So coming up to my 20th year, I decided I'd had enough of reorganization. I managed the transition of public health to government from the NHS. And I was having midlife crisis, and I was thinking, oh, this is horrible. I can't do another reorg, and what am I going to do with my life? And one of the things that had really come to weigh on me, particularly with this last reorganization, in this place that was particularly against these things, was that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how good of an idea I thought I had, no matter how innovative I was trying to be, I felt like I had a brick-shaped indentation on my forehead. And I just had enough. And I figured I'm not getting any younger. It's now or never. What am I going to do? Well, I thought, I'll just be an entrepreneur. That's easy, isn't it? Be an entrepreneur? Sounded great. Be my own boss, do my own business, make my own decisions, come up with my own ideas. I'll do that. So as things happen in reorg land, I kind of engineered a little way out, and I thought, right, I'll just do this now. I'll just make a big jump. So I built myself a little runway, and I took a big leap, and I thought, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move out of Herefordshire, because it's beautiful, but I'm kind of tired of sheep and apples. And I literally could have moved anywhere in the world. And I had such fond memories and such fond recollections of what it was like to live in the Yorkshire area that I thought, right then, I'll move to Sheffield. Why not? Not too big, not too small, affordable, good transport links. It's kind of in the thick of things. I'll be not quite such a small fish in such a big pond. Maybe I can get to know some people. And I'm going to go there, and I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I said to myself. So sure enough, I found a house somewhere and moved up to Sheffield, quit my job. And so I thought, well, I'll go and I'll hang out in Sheffield and see what's going on. Now you might be thinking I'm making this up. I'm not making this up. This is really the way my tiny little brain is working. It's this simple. So I thought, right, got settled in, unpacked the last box. I'll go and I'll start talking to people in Sheffield. So I get off the train and I'm walking up from the train station. If you've been to Sheffield, you know it has the lovely fountain now when you walk up. And painted on the floor was the Entrepreneur Festival. They'd put on a festival just for me because they knew I was trying so hard to learn to be an entrepreneur. And all my Christmases came at once, and I just thought, oh, you know when you just think the stars have aligned and something's there to help you believe that you've made the right decision in life and you're not as off your rocker as you sometimes fear at that 2 o'clock in the morning time when you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, oh my God, what have I done? I've quit my job. I've lost my security. What have I done? And then you walk out of the train and you know, the stars say, go on, you can do it. There are people here to help you. So I went to the Maid Festival, but because I had taken this leap, I only went to the fringe events. So I went to all the free stuff. And at every free thing I went to was this guy. Does everybody know Phil? Phil, or Mouthy Phil, I call him. And he knows this, and I love him for it. Everywhere I went, Phil was invariably sat right behind me, right here. And he was an expert on everything entrepreneurial. I mean, he had a word to say about everything. He's one of those people. You just need to blah, blah, blah. You just need to. So I'm sitting in these fringe thingies trying to learn stuff and thinking, I really don't know how to start, but here I am. There's got to be something great going on. You just need to do this, Elizabeth. Just turn up here. Just go there. Just talk to that person. So I was like, well, all right then. I'll do all those things. So the first thing he says, go to the Entrepreneur's Pub and pitch. So first of all, I had no idea what a pitch was, right? So I thought, well, I do like the pub, and maybe there'll be a lot of other entrepreneurs there, and I can kind of start to learn from them what they're doing. So if you want to talk about a lean method for learning how to be a startup and an entrepreneur, this is it. Just go to the pub and start talking to people and get you a mouthy Phil to sit back there who can tell you everything you need to know, and you won't have to invest a penny except for maybe a pint. So I go to this Entrepreneur's Pub, and what I had decided I was going to do in my stopgap before I hit the big one with whatever startup and entrepreneurial idea I was going to have is I wanted to write some kind of a nonfiction management manifesto based on my 20 years in the NHS as a director, and I was going to use it to do the whole credibility as a consultant type thing. I thought I can always fall back as a public health consultant, right? If I need to, I'll do that. So I pitched my nonfiction writers group called Author Entrepreneur. If anybody's heard of Guy Kawasaki, I've kind of stolen all his stuff. And I wanted to form a group in Sheffield to do just that. So I got up there and I pitched my first pitch ever. It was 60 seconds. The pub was loud. I was kind of lost in the front. I was trying to shout so people would hear me and hide at the same time because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I did it. And nobody heard a thing. And I got a few claps because people were too busy having pints. But it was awesome because I had done it. It was the first thing I had ever done that was entrepreneurial. I had an idea and I wanted to have a startup and I wanted people to come along with me, and I did it. So this is the first thing I ever won from my first pitch ever. You got a token for a pint of Entrepreneur's Ale if you pitched. Didn't matter how good it was or if anybody voted for your idea. So I thought, that is awesome. I love that. So there's Phil. So Phil says, that was great. Good for you. I'm so glad you got up there and pitched. I was like, I know, that was pretty fun. I'd do that again. He said, you know what you need to do? All you need to do is go to a startup weekend. I was like, okay, not real sure I know what a startup is, and I sure don't know what a startup weekend is, so why would I go there? So he said, right, you'll meet loads of like-minded people, you'll meet people with ideas, you'll meet people with skills, you'll all be enthusiastic and creative, and you have 54 hours to pitch an idea and bring it to fruition. And then there's a big competition and you might win something. And I was like, Phil, why would I do that? I'm not a tech. So in my head, I'm thinking hackathon, which I also knew nothing about, right? So I thought, Phil, why would I do that? I'm not a techie. I don't know how to code anything. I can't program anything. I've been a bureaucrat for 20 years. What do I know? Nobody cares about public health. He's like, no, it's not like that at all. You get a great mix of people. The more mix of people you get, the better. You should go. So this was November 2014. The Maid Festival was in September. Phil talks me into going to Startup Weekend. I turn up on the Friday night. Someone might need to flag me down if I'm going on too long, because I do get excited. I turned up on the Friday night, and who's there but Phil? So we're talking over the beer, and Phil says, you got to go pitch. You got to get up there and pitch. You just need to pitch. I was like, Phil, I wouldn't mind pitching, because I can pitch now. But I don't have an idea. If I had an idea, I would be more than happy to pitch, but I don't have one. Just get up there. Personal challenge. Just get up there. So I'm thinking, well, I would. I don't have an idea. So I sit in the audience and I'm watching the queue. So the queue up the side of the room, and you get like 60 seconds. You pitch your idea and you go off. And then you go and you stand in front of your flip chart. And then after everyone's pitched, everyone gets Post-it notes, and they choose the top 10 to 13, depending on how many people there are, of the ideas to go through the Startup Weekend. If you've never done a Startup Weekend, do one. They're awesome. So the last 2 or 3 people were stood up, and this idea just pops into my head, right? So I think, whoa, is that a dumb idea? Is that a terrible idea? Is that a really rubbish idea? I thought, personal challenge, Elizabeth. You leapt from your career. You're being an entrepreneur, and Phil told you to do it, so get up there and pitch. So I got up there. I was the last person, and I pitched this idea. I was so glad when it was over, but I felt so great. So I went and I stood next to my flip chart. But before that, I'd been scribbling furiously all the other ideas, because I was trying to find one that I thought could even remotely need a 400-year-old ex-managing director, public health somebody who knew how to be a bureaucrat. Is there any team I can blag my way onto who might need someone like me? So when I had to go stand next to my flip chart, I freaked out, because I thought, if I'm stood next to this flip chart, I can't go blag my way onto a team, and then I'm going to be the kid on the dodgeball team that's stood up against the wall waiting for someone to pick them, and it's just going to all go horribly wrong, and I'm going to go home and cry, and it'll be awful. So I stood next to my flip chart, and then everyone has to get up and put their Post-it notes. Everyone came to my flip chart, and I was like, what? So everyone was saying, I can code, and I can develop, and I can market, and I'm like, suddenly I had to put on my blagger's hat, and I was like, oh yeah, well, I thought it would work like this, and I thought it would have this feature, and I thought it would, and in my head I'm thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. Why are you talking to me? I want to go join that other team. Oh my God. So all the Post-it notes went up. I went back and sat in the audience where they picked the top 10 teams, and I looked back, and my flip chart was covered with Post-it notes, and it was one of the top 3 ideas with the most Post-it notes on there. So then I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be some other vetting round. There's got to be something where somebody who actually knows what they're doing, some kind of official, comes in and says, that's really nice you all voted for that one, but that's clearly a daft idea, so we'll just take that one out and we'll go on. I thought there must have been some other kind of screening process. So then they say, right, well, I'll run over to the other building and get started. So I'm thinking, right, the next screening process, next building, we'll get our stuff. So I'm golly-lagging around, just picking up my stuff. And this little student came over to me. I swear she looked about 12, but turns out she was about 18, 20. And she said, come on, we're going. I'm going to be on your team. I was like, what are you talking about? She said, your idea is one of the 13 going through. You got to go run over there, get the best workspace, get your team together, and get going. We got 54 hours. I was like, isn't there another round? No, you're the team leader. It's your team. This is an idea. We've got to win this. Come on. So I was like, I've never done this before. I don't know what's going on. So she grabs me by the hand. She walks me to the other building. And in the 5 minutes it takes us, she gives me Startup Weekend 101. So by the time I get there, I know everything about Startup Weekend, and I am absolutely freaking out. Because I'm thinking, oh, I was just going to come and doss around and drink the free beer and meet people and try to look helpful and maybe staple the papers and that kind of thing. And suddenly I'm leading this team. So to make a really long story even longer, we put our idea together, and it was called Appointment Doctor. So what I'd come up with was a way to reduce missed appointments in primary care, which is a multi-million-pound problem every year. We pitched it on the Sunday night, and we won it. We won this first idea. So this is me, this 400-year-old here. These are all my student co-teammates who are all fantastically, wonderfully talented, lots of skill and innovation, lots of energy. So the second thing I won, so the first thing I won was a pint. The second thing I won was a piece of paper. Woohoo! We got a piece of paper. And it was a fantastic experience, and I've been bitten by the bug ever since. So if you have a chance to do a startup weekend, there is one next weekend in Sheffield. I think there are still a few tickets left. No one does them like Sheffield. They're great. That's my plug. So what do you think happened next? Phil said, beginner's luck, bet you can't do it again. So I said, maybe he's right. Maybe that was a fluke. Maybe I still shouldn't be doing this. He said, there's one in Manchester in February. Why don't you try that? I was like, all right then. So I went to the Future Everything Festival in Manchester in February 2015. And I called up the organizer and I said, I don't know anyone in Manchester and I'm not a techie and I don't really have any skills, but I'd like to come do another startup weekend. And it had a specific call to action. And he was like, that's great. Well, your idea sounds great. When you get here, I'll curate you with the team and then you can just go along. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. So I turn up, and to make a really long story short, and it's not due to me being a horrible, difficult person, I ended up being a team by myself on a startup weekend. I'm not kidding. That's a different story for during the break if you're interested. So that's me pitching the idea with my little white screen, with my little blue writing. I didn't even really know how to make a slide very well. And I'm pitching. This was my product. This piece of paper flowchart was my paper prototype product that I pitched at this startup weekend in front of what was essentially an international audience as part of the Future Everything conference. My little Bob Todd up there, and I talked them through this. And I won that startup weekend. And I won, so this is where we get really lean now. So it was a lean startup weekend as opposed to just your normal startup weekend. Pitched this idea with that paper prototype. And I won a £5,000 development fund, a 3-day design sprint, and I got to stand at this pitch stand at the Future Everything conference for 2 or 3 days in Manchester Town Hall, with the whole of the EU, the UK and the EU milling around, looking at all the different things that were going on. So I got to pitch to the local governments, which is what my product is mainly aimed at, but I'll talk about that later. So I got lots of exposure and people wanted to know what it was about and so on. So it really made everything take off. But the clincher to this is that Digital Catapult, which is a government body to help catapult us digitally, provided a 3-day design sprint. So on the Sunday night, after doing this team for the 54 hours, on the Monday morning they said, right, you've won. So from Monday morning to Wednesday afternoon, you've got a design team that will build you an MVP. If you can draw it out, if you can take your little flow chart and describe it well enough to a developer and a designer, they'll build you something. I was like, okay, that sounds like fun, great. So I spent 3 days with a designer and a developer with my little piece of paper, and they built me Textocracy. And this is what it looked like. This was the MVP. So if you want to talk about lean, you can't get much leaner than a piece of paper. With that piece of paper, I was able to communicate with someone who knew what they were doing, who was able to build me something that actually worked. So this is quite a basic format, but it was still the same concept, that if you text to a number like that, it would turn up like this. So the idea was to capture comments from people who were very limited in their ways of interacting with, for instance, public services, and trying to display it in some way where that organization could really easily monitor it. So I had a product. I left a startup weekend with a product that I could go out and then show people and talk to people about. And it didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be pretty. And it didn't have to have lots of bells and whistles. It simply had to demonstrate that it was solving the problem that I was trying to solve. And I could show it in action. And I could talk about, one day it'll be able to do this or it'll be able to do that. And you can imagine that, in a few months' time, I can have it doing this, that, and the other. So I was able to immediately have those conversations with this little thing. And I did it during the Future Everything conference and got a lot of councils who wanted to talk to me afterwards. So that for me is a really key lesson in lean startuping. Just have something that demonstrates what you're trying to do enough to get another bit of time with the person you're trying to sell to. So, what is this thing she's talking about? How did that little ugly paper prototype become something of it? Well, it's a business. It really is a business. So the call to action from the Lean Startup Weekend was opening up the user voice in public sector services. I had seen this problem for 20 years. I was responsible for listening to people about what sort of public sector services they wanted in public health. I had a legal duty to consult as someone who held a budget for these types of services. And without fail, we regularly could not crack the 2% mark. And that 2% in our response rates for consultations were usually white, affluent, middle-aged females. And we had to make our decisions, or we did make our decisions, based on those comments. So our services were very well designed for that demographic. And there were lots of people not getting a look in. Where were our young people? Where were our people on low incomes? Where were our people with English as a second language or with poor literacy? We weren't hearing them. So I talked to people about all the different reasons, and you get to do this on a startup weekend. You leave the building and you go out and you really talk to people. And I asked people why they didn't bother with these current consultation methods. Every single one that we talked about presented just enough of a barrier that they didn't bother. Young people certainly wouldn't do register or do a login and password. Nobody wanted to go to a town hall meeting. Nobody would sit down and write on a web form. All these reasons presented either it's just too hard, or it presented just enough of a gap between, I feel really strongly about that. When I get home, I'm going to look up the number and I'm going to call them and tell them. And invariably, you really don't, do you? Either the fire's gone out of your feeling or you've just completely forgot. So I built Textocracy to overcome all of those barriers. Simple SMS, anyone with an old mobile phone, even a 20-year-old Nokia, can text what they want, when they want, 24/7, 365. So this is an actual text received by HealthWatch Rotherham. Not everybody tweets. So when you see the social media monitoring, which is very valuable, so Textocracy isn't meant to replace everything else. You have lots of 20 to 35-year-old male cyclists. They like to tweet about potholes and stuff. Mums in parks like to tweet a lot and they get heard. Not everybody does that. So this just gives another layer of voice. So Textocracy is like Twitter and WhatsApp for organizations and services, but it's better because it's anonymous. It doesn't require a user and password and login. You don't have to have an internet connection or a smartphone. It's anonymous, you can just text whatever you want, whenever you want. And one of the most important things for me, because the company was designed with a social mission and a social impact in mind, is that even if your spelling is this bad, nearly every word in this text this is an actual text, is misspelled. And any service who's reading that knows exactly what that person's saying. So for this one, if you can't read it, it says, can you please tell doctors, surgery staff, some people can't book our appointments online because we don't have a computer machine. So I can imagine someone sat at the GP and saying, yeah, choose and book. Just go on choose and book and go and choose your outpatient appointment place and time, and they'll take care of you. It's really easy, don't worry about it. And a lot of people, particularly older people or people who feel disempowered for whatever reason, won't say to that doctor, are you stupid? I don't have a computer, I don't know how to use it. Why would I do that? How am I gonna do that? Have some sympathy for me. How am I supposed to? They won't say that. They'll just say, oh, all right then, and they'll go out. And they don't have another way to do that. So I just want to give this person a pat on the back for saying, well, actually, I want to have a rant, and I have a way now to do that. And this is something important for services to keep in mind. Oh, sorry, did you want to? I'll go back. So all it does is, and you'll get to use it here in a minute, you send a text. It gets displayed on the data dashboard, which is slightly more sophisticated than the one you saw earlier, but not much. And you get a confirmed text that says that your text has been received. So it is anonymous, you don't get in a spam loop. It's completely initiated, as you will do here. The service doesn't have to have your number to text to you to ask you a question on a scale of 1 to 5 or anything like that. You just say whatever you want. The texts are also stored on the back end in CSV files so that they can be further analyzed with date and timestamps, and you can get trends and information over time. So they get output reports. Depending on the size of the organization, they might want them quarterly or annually or monthly or so on. Lots of different uses have come to light. So people have come to me saying, I like to use this for events, for real-time, live-time evaluation. So I've got to run it for Lean Conference a few weeks ago. They ran it for the whole 3 days. I've run it for several other NHS events. Jamchester used it and so on. So people keep coming to me and saying, hey, can I use that thing? I've got this event coming on and I'd really like to use that. So there are lots of alternative uses. Its design is for local government and NHS, public sector services to open up that voice, but there are a myriad of industries that it can be used for. So my next goal is something like a hotel or hospitality chain, for instance. So I had the minimum viable product, was built in February. The early adopters started to come on in September. And then from January, my paying organizations have come on, and I've had about 15 organizations using the product. I guess it's probably closer to 20 now using the product. It started with the Lean Startup Win, and then in September I was accepted onto the .Forge Social Impact Accelerator, which has been a massive help. Talk about supporting a lean startup to make the right decisions and not make wasteful, hasty investments and so on. And I've just gotten accepted onto Unlimited's Big Venture Challenge, which is about growth and scalability for social impact ventures. I was just at the launch on Monday in London. So they're going to help me, I hope, get this product out to as many public sector services as possible so that everyone can have their say. The main aim, routes to market, are mainly the NHS and local government through my existing contacts from 20 years in the business. There are over 10,000 GP practices, 353 digital councils, and 150 Health Watch chapters. So those are just some of the first target segment. In the meantime, these events and companies and so on are coming on board. So the point is that everyone should have a voice. You shouldn't have to give up your anonymity to have that voice. You shouldn't be penalized with an expensive mobile package if you're very income conscious and don't have a big data allocation. You don't need the latest gizmo. All the different reasons, whether you're in a GP surgery or whether you're at a concert or at a conference, why not have your say in any way that you want to? And in your own language. Someone shouldn't be asking you what the bed and the bathroom and the breakfast is like if you want to talk about the reception staff, the pillows and the something else. You know, you should be able to talk about whatever is most important to you. And then organizations should take those trends and information of what people talk about and create any further deep dive consultations based on that and make them accessible, in my view. So that is Textocracy. That's how it operates, and those are my contact details. I'm going to just take a breath because I know that's been quite a whirlwind, and I do get very excited and talk very quickly, so I do apologize for that. I'll slow down now that we're at the end. And I'm going to move to the next slide and pull up the data dashboard that is attached to that number. And you can all take out your phones and send us a text. It is anonymous, so you can say anything you'd like. And we'll just see how it works. That's great. We've already got a couple up there. Okay. It should be free to you in your mobile package. If you can't read the number, let me know and I'll read it out to you. And honestly, say anything you like. Yes, it was Sally Kay at Startup Weekend. Who knows Sally Kwok? Oh, she's the one who saved my life walking between buildings at Startup Weekend. I could not have done it without her. Sorry, I shouldn't have asked. It's an anonymous comment. I should not have asked. You didn't have to fess up. Okay, so that's Textocracy, and that's my story. I'll end there. Obviously, I'll take questions. But though I didn't really hone my lessons in a pointed fashion as to why Lean is so great, I hope it was a bit self-evident, but I'm happy to answer more questions about that. Is that all right? Thank you. Thank you.